Hello there, and welcome back to Gooner U, where there are no degrees because the learning never stops. I'm Dove, a TA here at Gooner U, and my friend Keith is our stalwart distinguished professor of Arsenal and football studies. Enter our classroom as we discuss the week's news involving Arsenal, Premier League, Champions League, international football, and sometimes MLS, because we're Americans. This week, Arsenal faced Newcastle United at home with no midweek match. A nice break for the boys and us. How you doing, Keith?
Hi, Dove. I guess we'll talk about this a lot today. Do you feel unsatisfied with this? I don't know. We won. It feels, and is this? It's a strange thing as we go down the stretch here. I don't know. We'll talk about it, but
yeah, well, we will talk about it more. Yeah, it's there's definitely going to be talk of goal difference and trying to rack up goals. That is one thing we certainly did not do yesterday.
No, nor have we done much at all this season, to be honest. But
right. Kick off our news discussion today, I wanted to let everyone know about something that I found out about a couple weeks ago, which is that Arsenal is hosting youth soccer camps over the summer. So they are coming to the United States in a big way. They're hitting, I think it was like 50 cities or something. They're really pretty comprehensive in the area that they're covering, which is really cool. So all over the place. The nearest ones to my region of the country are not particularly close, which isn't terribly surprising given where I live. We'd have to go way out into Connecticut or New Jersey, nothing really attractive there. However, there is one in the greater Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. I think Plano technically is where it is, although, like with World Cup, they call it Dallas. Yep. And so we have actually signed my son up. So whenever we next record after that happens, I will report back. But that is sure to be a fun time. So he's actually leaving school a little early because it overlaps with his last week of school. So, whatever. It's for a good cause.
Actually, yes, I didn't mean to ask that. When about this? What time? When is it?
All different times, depending on the location. And I have to imagine because they do have Hale End staff that is running these, it's probably a fairly limited. They may only have 3 or 4 crews of people, and they just kind of hit 1 week at a time and kind of make their way through the country, probably. And I'm sure they probably also try to time it according to summer break schedules in different parts of the country. I know Texas and a lot of places in the South do have an earlier start to their summer break just because, severe heat hits a lot quicker than it does in our part of the country. So, yeah.
Well, also, at least in Houston, the school year actually starts earlier because I know in New York, right, it doesn't start until after Labor Day. So it's the summer. I think actually the summer's shifted.
Exactly.
So their summer break starts earlier.
Right, so summer break starts earlier and ends earlier, and that's why the camp would make sense being a little bit earlier too. I saw that the ones that are in New Haven, for instance, like that is later. That would be his summer break. But so that's great, and it's actually cool. I mean, apparently part of this, obviously they're scouting, and it's potential for you to get invited to fly to London as a result of this. Now, that is not something that I've mentioned to my son, and he doesn't have he's been trying to watch the show more, but hasn't had the greatest track record. So I think the secret will stay safe for a little bit longer. I don't want to get his hopes up, but yeah, it was I'm reminding myself, it was actually funny as we were watching the Newcastle match yesterday. He was asking about how that happens. Like, how does somebody play for Arsenal? Like, how does that happen? And I was telling him how, it's, who knows, for something like from this camp, they could decide that they would invite you to their academy or something like that. Messi traveled to Barcelona from Argentina. His family moved for him to go to their academy. That was how his career started. I told him, we'd have to work out the details, but I'd be open to talking about moving to London if that were something that happened to you. Not that I think it's likely, but it's a possibility. And he just started crying. He's like, I don't want to go to London. So
yeah, I will say there are a lot of things that are changed and all that, and especially because he's an American citizen, he wouldn't be allowed to move over until he was a certain age. And now getting into visa restrictions and things like that. Obviously, Arsenal's purpose here is multifold. First, of course, is, as you said, scouring for talent across the U.S. also this is just sort of a general goodwill mission, right? They're here to,
Right.
just to show the flag and just recruit fans and things like that. I suspect too. I was curious about the dates, not so much in the context of summer vacation, but really thinking about the World Cup this summer.
Right.
So much of their staff is not going to be very busy during the World Cup because
that's true. Yeah.
So many of the players are going to be there. But I imagine that's partly what they may be trying to gamble on is the, you think the World Cup was cool? Why don't you come check out one of the, a team where all these guys play for? That's
right.
But still, definitely kind of cool and kind of interesting. If nothing else, it's just kind of a cool experience to say you'll be able, to be able to say he did, at least the one time.
Yeah, he comes away with a cool Arsenal training kit. It looks reminiscent. It doesn't have white sleeves, but red shirt, white shorts, red socks. It has the Arsenal crest, and it says in very clear letters underneath, like training camp or something. Yes. That's what's not to be confused with their actual academy.
Of course. And two, we say looking for players. They're obviously going to be, they're going to keep an eye out if there's anybody who's of interest to them. They'll make a note. They're not, and even the ones coming back to London is probably kind of this will be a nice experience for everybody, but
yeah. Yeah, and there is, as far as what their registration form said, they did ask if he is a goalkeeper or an outfield player, but also made it clear not to expect any goalkeeper-specific instruction. Mm-hmm. But I wonder if they'll use that just to make sure that teams, like if they're breaking into scrimmages or something, they can use that in the beginning to make sure that there's a keeper on each squad or something. I don't know, but that was interesting. What I also found interesting as I was reading up on their summer camps is apparently, and not surprisingly, they do UK summer camps also. Mm-hmm. And these are even more in depth. So these last a few weeks at a time, and you basically stay in a boarding school in England. They have locations in and out of London in a few different places. And to me, that combines like a love of Arsenal and a love of Harry Potter, like staying in an English boarding school. Like how cool would that be? Like you're going to Arsenal Hogwarts.
Do remember though, this is of course for English children for whom that has a very different different kind of connotations to it. Not the Harry Potter thing, but just staying in the boarding schools. And there, I think that it is much more a serious recruitment kind of effort.
Yeah.
Just think about the length of time. Like how long is the camp you're talking about? Is what, a week?
It's a week. It's a 1 week camp.
Yeah. So the length of time and the kind of instructions going to be available to the people there, I think is going to be
right.
But of course, it makes sense.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it's actually funny because so my son was asking, like, am I going to meet the players? I was like, no. First of all, no. Second, where are they going to be? Like their best players are playing for their countries. It is World Cup summer. So yeah, but it does make me wish for, and I don't know if they ever do this, but like an Arsenal fantasy camp for the grown-ups, like, that would be really cool.
I actually had one of our fearless leader from the Houston Gooners was in Tampa last weekend for the Fan Fest.
Right.
And he did say that, there were a lot of things going on there in connection to that, but he did say some of the smaller clubs did actually have some actually relatively well-known players come. But he said, that's really easy to do when when you're a club legend at Burnley to go meet the five fans and it's a little different than an Arsenal or a Chelsea, City, United, these teams that are going to have much more massive fan followings at this kind of event.
The next thing to talk about is this came across my news feed as I was scrolling through earlier in the week, and anything that mentions offside naturally catches my attention as one of the trickier rules in soccer. And I was like, wait a second, what does this headline say? First daylight offside goal scored in Canadian Premier League. And I'm thinking, daylight offside? What is going on there? And I guess maybe you can tell us a little more about it. This is a rule that they're debuting and kind of testing out in Canada?
Right. So this is all the brainchild of Arsene Wenger. So I have a lot of time for it. But basically, the idea is rethinking offside. The current offside rules pretty straightforward. No part of your body that can score can be beyond a player's body that can score a goal can be beyond the last defender. So like your hand could be, because you can't score with your hand, but anything else, head, knee, hip, toes, all of it has to be even with or behind the last defender. What they're saying here is basically giving it a cushion, a margin of error. The idea of, they call it daylight offside, because the idea when there's clear daylight between the attacker's position and the defender.
Only then are you offside, basically.
Only then would you be offside. And the idea is to encourage attack play and goal scoring. There obviously, it's one thing to sit and come up with a rule. Then, of course, you have to test it, put it in a game situation. And so they got volunteers for the Canadian Premier League, which is officially the highest level of the sport in Canada, minus the 3 Canadian teams who play in MLS. But that's the top Canadian professional league, is trying the rule. And apparently this past week, I guess it was, so it was this past week. So I see it's the 19th. Look at the calendar. So I guess this actually happened right before we recorded last week.
Right.
They did it in a game involving Pacific FC and Halifax Wanderers. Yeah. It appears, I think it was Pacific who scored. Yeah, Pacific FC scored the goal, and it was allowed, even though he was offside, according to the traditional understanding of the rule. He was not, in terms of the daylight description of what that means. I mean, we'll see. This is, I think they said the first time. This is the first time it's been done. The Canadian Premier League season is just getting underway. They've agreed to use it all season, and so we'll sort of see how it plays out. And then there's, if they like it, certainly the IFAB can adopt it into the rule book, and we might see this next year. I would be a little skeptical of that. Also, let me rephrase that. It's not going to happen for next season in the Premier League, in part because the Canadian Premier League is just getting started, whereas the season will end later this calendar year, certainly well after. So imagine they'll do it. There'll be a time to review. They'll vote. So I guess I'd say fall of 27 would be the earliest you might see this in a Premier League setting. But it's interesting to see, and I'll be kind of curious how this works out over time.
So let me ask you, do you think, so you're a forward player in Canada under this rule, do you think you play any differently, or do you think you basically play the same, but you just, more calls can go in your favor?
That's a good question. I think it's going to be interesting to watch and see, because I think you could think it's for both attackers and defenders, right? Because defenders run the offside trap in a particular way, right? You keep close, you step forward or step back, as the case may be. Same with strikers and forward players in terms of how they try to position themselves. We can point to an example from this past weekend's game about watching offside calls and sort of positioning yourself and timing your runs and things like that. I think it'll be interesting to watch, because again, you can write the rule, and if you watch the replay of the goal that actually gets counted, it comes off a scramble, so it's not quite the same kind of. It's not the same way we typically think of offside, which is players timing runs in behind defenders. It's a bit of a scramble that ends up, that is where the goal comes in. So it's. I think we're going to have to see it in action a few more times and really sort of see those particular moments where, okay, under the old system, like this goal, under the old system he was offside. Under the new one, he's not. And so I think we're going to need this again, first time. So we're going to need to see this a few more times before we can kind of judge what we're looking at here, which is the whole point of the whole thing. So.
Right. So meanwhile, back across the pond, this was a fairly eventful week for Chelsea.
Yeah, that's one way to. I mean, truth is, every week is an eventful week when you're Chelsea. So we talked a little bit about some of the troubles they were facing. They were on a run of 5 games lost in the league. Apparently, I think I saw they were shut out in all 5, which I think was the last time that happened was the same year the Titanic was a thing.
Oh man.
So anyway, all of this led to the firing of Liam Rossinier. which we don't root for people to lose their jobs. And I'll be honest, I didn't really get enough about him to really decide whether or not I'm happy about this. Certainly from his perspective, he seems to me, and some of the stories that have come out afterwards, he seems to be simply a guy who was in over his head. Got promoted a little too soon for the kind of position Chelsea manager is.
Mm-hmm.
Also walking into a situation that it feels like it's increasingly becoming toxic, if it isn't already. The sound of it, the players were not terribly happy with Enzo Maresca being let go earlier, which led to Rossinior's hiring. So they're not happy about that. He hasn't exactly had a great deal of success in his career as a manager, partly because he's so young, hasn't really done anything yet. It's not a bad thing. It just it's too early to say, and so it's hard for him to command the same level of respect. Plus, I think the players are frustrated. It's a lot of young players. They don't really have veterans. They don't really have experienced players you can rely on to sort of help right the ship in bad times, and so they seem a little rudderless. And couldn't happen to a nicer club, I guess.
Well, and of course, when I'm talking about their eventful week, I mean, so like earlier in the week, Rossini was fired, but then today, I think, right, they ended up beating Leeds to advance to the FA Cup final. So
yes, in spite of all that, so the new manager bounces real. I forget his name, but I think he's their youth team manager who was called up to replace him on the sidelines. They got a goal, beat Leeds 1-0. They will be headed back to Wembley. They played the semis at Wembley. They'll be headed back to Wembley on May 16th to face Manchester City, who fell behind 1-0 to Southampton, but scored twice shortly thereafter and won 2-1. So City and Chelsea in the FA Cup final on May 16th. And I think we're all rooting for the Meteor. I will say this though, and because this I think is the more interesting thing is to shift the attention from Chelsea to Manchester City, because they also had a fairly eventful week. They officially went top of the table on Wednesday with a 1-0 win over Burnley. But now you look at them, they've got 5 league games remaining, with quite a logjam building up in their schedule. So the Burnley game was moved up as a result of their playing in the semifinals this weekend, but they still have the game against Crystal Palace left to play from when they were from advancing to the Carabao Cup final, and they have a game against Bournemouth that needs to be rescheduled because it's the weekend of the FA Cup final. The Palace game still remains to be seen when that's going to be rescheduled because they still have the semifinals of the Europa Conference League and then potentially the final. I think they should be able to get the Bournemouth game settled pretty quickly, although they may be waiting to see what happens with Palace before they do that. Basically, City's schedule is going to be kind of a mess through the end of the season, and I'm here for it. I think think about the struggles we had, and I think City's in a better place than we've been health-wise, and certainly in terms of their depth. But think about the struggles we've been having the last couple of months with the constant 2 games a week. All it takes is one little slip. All it takes is one little slip up in the league, and we an advantage Arsenal once again. Also, oddly enough, they're actually not going to play. So I'm looking at they are. We play on Saturday, which means we're going to be 2 games ahead of them in terms of games played. Their next game in the league isn't until Monday.
Yeah.
Their game against Everton got shifted to a Monday. So, their schedule's going to get a little weird over the last couple of weeks. And of course, the league doesn't want any of this to go beyond whatever date was the 24th, which is the whatever
decision
the final,
day or whatever.
The final day of the season. The following weekend, of course, is the Champions League final. And after that, I don't know that it's official, but like the next day, the 31st, like the U.S. is playing Senegal in a friendly. The World Cup kicks off like 12 days after that. So they're up against a hard deadline. They really can't push these much further. I looked at it at some point this afternoon, and I think I figured out which midweeks would make sense for these two games. But it's going to get a little hairy for them. And, honestly, what I'm really rooting from the FA Cup final is a very exhausting shootout. And possibly a red card or two. But yeah,
interesting.
It's going to be really interesting as we come down to the end, and we'll talk about it a lot more from the Arsenal perspective. But obviously, watching, City's got a lot of things that they're working around as well. So we'll see how this goes.
As far as you rooting for a red card, that would result in a Premier League suspension for the next match, right? At least
I think so, because
they're
both
BFA.
under the auspices of the FA. Correct. I think so. But also just because I suppose is a good reason as well.
Arsenal played Newcastle yesterday as we record this on Sunday. This was a Saturday afternoon or late morning match in the US for us, evening match in the UK. And we got the points that we wanted. It was overall a favorable result. Definitely worth some level of celebration.
Yeah, 1-0 to the Arsenal, mate. Come on. We'll talk about this. Yeah, we'll talk about this more in a bit. But I'm not let's start with the good part there, which is that we won the game. We got the 3 points, and we're now back on top of the league.
Yep, we are. Looking at the lineup for one thing, so I did notice the return of Ben White over Mosquera. As far as we know, Mosquera is healthy, though. This was just a strategic decision.
Mosquera was on the bench. He was, I think, the only real defender on the bench. I mean, Lewis Skelly was there also, but it's kind of more of a midfielder, I think. But I mean, really. Obviously, Timber still being out. To me, the big advantage was seeing Odegaard come back, Eze come back, Madueke come back after we talked about some of his injury last time, and then also Saka being back on the bench. So there was a sense coming into this that we might be building. We might be able to to be in a good position to sprint that way down to the end, to the end of the season.
Yeah, so the early excitement started building when we took our first corner kick, and they did a maneuver that we hadn't really seen before. And the first time they did it, it kind of looked like they messed up. Like they were about to take the corner kick, and all of a sudden Odegaard rushes toward the corner, and they take it short to him. And I don't remember what he did as a result of that. I don't remember if he pushed in or if he passed it away. But then nothing ended up happening. The ball got cleared. And then next corner kick, they did the same thing again, making it very clear this was intentional, not that there was any kind of mistake there. Then he got it from there out to Eze, who took a shot that missed, but was a credible shot on goal. And then we got to the third iteration of this thing where Odegaard runs toward the corner, but Madueke gets the ball past him out to Eze, who opens up the scoring in the 10th minute. That was pretty incredible. It reminded me of the old knock joke where you say banana twice and then you say orange, and aren't you glad I didn't say banana? It was like that with Newcastle. We really suckered them into it.
Yeah, there was some talk about this week on the Ars cast, and I think that's right. We talked about this a little bit because it was really, I think it was Southampton we saw. We started to see a lot more of the short corners. I mean, they're obviously with Nico Jover, Arsenal's very deliberate about what they do on set pieces, and there's clearly something they're seeing. Maybe it's a weakness in the defenses. Maybe the hoof it into the box, or in swinger into the box. There are things. Teams are defending that more effectively now, so you can't run that same kind of play, and so it ends up looking kind of weird. But as you watch it, I think the thing to watch on these successive corners is not the Arsenal players making the runs; it's the Newcastle players. I mean, there's a lot of talk about how a lot of this is being drawn out of the National Football League, the American football, the NFL. And one of the things they'll do is they watch, as you'll talk about, they call it motion, where you'll see, the quarterback stands there and usually picks up his leg and puts it down, and a player will move. Sometimes he'll run in or out or across the formation. And part of the reason he's doing that is to see how the defense reacts to it. And you can learn something about what they're doing based on, who follows the guy. Does anyone move? Okay, if no one moves, they're in zone. Like, there's a lot of things you can pick up by using motion.
Yeah.
And so as you watch that third time, because the difference is the Newcastle defenders follow Odegaard, and that's what opens up the space.
4 of them, yes, exactly.
Right. Yep. That's it. And like I almost, like, thinking about that, I can almost imagine, like, that Jover on the bench going, yes, it worked. Like, that was the point. You drew them out. You found the space, and Eze puts in he tried to go, the first one he tried to go near post, wasn't particularly good, or didn't quite get it on goal, but kind of close. The second one, he goes to the top corner, far side, and much more effective. And it's a great finish, and of course, point to the badge. So the first time, first goal he scored quickly. First goal he scored for Arsenal, not against Crystal Palace or his former club, Crystal Palace, or against Spurs. The club he obviously dislikes as a long time fan.
Right. So let me also just give some credit that I had misattributed a little bit. That corner actually sailed past Odegaard to Havertz. Havertz received it, then he makes the assist out to Eze to score the goal. So that was a good heads up play from Havertz also to make that happen.
And I think that there was some talk about this. Adrian Clark talked about this week. Like, one of the things we've struggled with is just having consistency in our lineup. I think he said in the Premier League this season we've had something like 21 different front fours. So we think about our 3 frontline players, but also the key attacking midfielder, and just that kind of constant churn and change. It just makes it very hard to get any consistency. We've seen that a little bit. I think you saw a lot of this with sort of the way Victor Gyökeres doesn't receive passes and stuff. And so being able to have, and I think Madueke is a limited player, but getting him a couple of games, getting Odegaard back, having Eze, having Kai Havertz, like having these kind of offensive players and having all of them, which is kind of what this roster is really designed to be like. Having all those, I think it does allow us to create a lot more opportunities. And I'd say for that first, 30 minutes, we were, there was that little weirdness early on, but other than that, I thought we were definitely the better team, and I think we were starting to feel like it felt like we had a second or maybe a third goal in us that day.
Yeah, it felt like it at times. Definitely didn't quite get there, but there are a couple of moments. I'm rewatching the highlights as we talk, and oh man, that bicycle kick from Martinelli. Oh, did that feel like that was going to be one?
The problem is by the time you register what's happened, it's already in the keeper's hands.
I know,
just because one of those things happens so quickly. But if you want to look to, I think where the game really shifted to a certain extent, Havertz gets injured, comes off. Didn't look good, walks straight down the tunnel, which is never a good sign. That was about 30. That was the 34th minute. And then later in the, 53rd, so just after halftime, Eze comes off, but he kind of walks off, takes his seat there. Now, I'll say this. Post-game, this was Arteta's comment about them. He said, they are muscular niggles. We don't think it's too much. We have to wait and see if they're going to be available for Wednesday.
Yeah.
It sounds like the Eze one was precautionary, so they're he felt something, and so let's just, because he goes down and Rice, I think it was him. He goes down and Rice is immediately doing the sub sign.
Yeah.
It's obviously to lose both of them after just getting them back like this would be tough. It would be very tough.
But the football taketh away, and then the football giveth back when Saka came on toward the end, right?
Right. I mean, yeah, it was so great to see him back. I admit, it was about 70 minutes, and look, we've talked about Madueke a lot this year. I don't dislike the guy. I certainly think he has his redeeming qualities as a player, but Saka's is Saka. He is that good. It has hurt us the amount of time he's either missed or clearly not been at 100%. And so for him to come on, and frankly, I thought he was really good in the 10 minutes he got, 10, 15 minutes he got at the end. Kind of carved out some chances. I think if he's a little more fit, I think he might actually have been able to score in those circumstances. But to see him back, but again, it's I'd rather have a one in, one out situation as opposed to just out and then still be missing Saka. But it's going to be an interesting challenge for us down the stretch over these last few games, because we've still got, hold on, what was it, 4 left? We have four games left in the league, 2 Champions League games, and then hopefully a trip to Budapest. I mean, that's what we're looking at right now is between 6, maybe 7 games. So, it's going to be a little bit of mix and match down the stretch here, which is unfortunate, but we'll kind of see, obviously, with Havertz and Eze in terms of how they come back.
Yeah, so the to me, what was the most controversial moment of this match was pretty clearly when Gyökeres is charging toward the goal, and I think it was Gyökeres. And Nick Pope comes way off his line, way outside the box, and is crapping his pants and just does whatever he can to stop him, which involved tugging him to the ground in a pretty rough manner. The referee blew the whistle right away, took a minute, and ended up giving a yellow card. It then went to a lengthy VAR review, at which point they don't overrule his decision and issue a straight red for, what clearly seems at least a potential case of DOGSO denial of an obvious goal scoring opportunity. I think that looks to me like DOGSO if I were giving out cards. Like, what's your take on that?
Yeah, that was a tough one. When he gave the yellow, VAR was not going to overturn that. I think Meteor was the defender who was there. I mean, some people were talking about this, and I don't think it's an unfair point. If the situations were reversed in terms of the Newcastle players, if that was Theo pulls down Gyökeres and it's Pope, sort of is kind of back, headed towards the goal, that would be, we would usually rule that as DOGSO. Like, that would be considered a denial. So it's kind of interesting that the keeper making the tackle isn't the case. Now, I will say, Gyökeres is a bit out wide. I think, we can argue is certainly in a covering position, and especially given, Gyökeres' position relative to the goal. Again, I think it's one of those when the call was made with the yellow, VAR, I think was very unlikely to overturn that. I wasn't surprised when they came back and said they kept it as a yellow. I'm not quite where Arteta is, who post game, what was his?
What did he say? I read allusions to his comments. I did not actually see or hear them for myself.
Yeah, so this is, it was clear. He referred to it as the second time in 2 weeks.
Right.
This happened. He talks a lot. So in my opinion, it's a clear red card. I've watched it 10 times. If you've ever played football, it is a red card. It's the second time in 2 games, because I guess Manchester City, when Kai Havertz goes through, Kusanov fouls him 1-1, the title is there. It's a red card, guys.
I think for me, part of what makes it worse is that Gyökeres had run past him, right? It wasn't like it was in the act act of tackling to get the ball away, right? It was
Yeah.
like the ball was away. Gyökeres was running around him, and it's like a last-ditch effort, like just grabbing out and stopping him from advancing further. It's like that just makes it look more severe, even though like I see that, yeah, there is another defender between Gyökeres and the goal, so it wasn't an assured opportunity. But I mean, just I guess almost the level of contact, even if it weren't DOGSO, like it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean that to me, I think is actually probably the greater argument for the red is that it's so basely cynical. Like it's not a slide challenge gone wrong.
Right.
It's a tackle. He reaches out his arms, he pulls him back.
It's an American football tackle.
Yeah, and that's you know, and it's frustrating. And we should point out it was Nick Pope who tripped Gyökeres on the box in the game in St. James's Park earlier this season. Where we screamed for a red and a penalty, right? I went off on that one.
I completely forgot about that.
That was Newcastle. So that's twice now that
boy.
Pope has walked the line against Gyökeres and arguably gotten away with it both times. So it's a little frustrating that would happen that way. The Kusanov one, he talks a little bit about last week. We didn't talk about this last week. I was screaming about it when it happened. The more I think about that one, I'm not as sure.
Yeah.
It's tough. And again, that was when the game was 1-1. We get the red, and you know, I think we could have. I mean, I'm not saying we would have won in that circumstance, right. But I think we're in much better shape to get the point and get what we really want out, any result out of there. But yeah, it's frustrating. Like there, I guess I'm kind of like trying to think of because I'm sure I've said this in other circumstances. I understand why the call was made the way it was. I'm not thrilled about it, but I also don't think it's like a particularly of all the injustices we've dealt with this season. I don't know that it's I don't know that it's quite there, but it certainly looks bad in terms of the tackle and everything else. And so I am a little frustrated.
So for you, it comes down to the position of the other defender, basically. Is that
the position of the other defender, right? Yeah. Because the idea is with DOGSO, right, is that you'll also hear people talk about the last defender. And in those circumstances, we don't really consider the keeper as a defender, which is kind of funny in this case because, again, if that was Theo pulls him down and he's bearing down on Pope, it would, you'd call it DOGSO. But it's funny that it's not in this circumstance, even though Theo cannot use his hands, unlike Pope, So I don't know. It was. Yeah, it was a little frustrating in that regard, but I understand it. I see where that decision came from.
Yeah, makes sense. So speaking of Pope, this was an interesting game for him and for Raya. I think overall both had that incident aside had pretty good games as far as actually blocking and averting chances. One thing I noticed with Raya early on was we had talked last week about the close call. I think it was like the 4th minute against City where Haaland rushed at Raya and almost tapped in a goal. So what we'd talked about was how, and you pointed out that this is something Raya does, so I was looking for it, but where he'll receive a back pass and immediately just bounce it basically to the edge of a 6-yard box and then look to do something with it from there. I definitely saw him doing that yesterday, and the Newcastle players were like, pressing in that situation, trying to make something of it the way that Haaland had tried, but didn't come anywhere near as close as he did. But yeah, that's interesting. Raya may want to reevaluate that habit that may turn out badly at some point.
Yeah, it may have to be a little more careful with it. Though I do also think some of that too is that, again, Erling Haaland is a robot. Like a man that size should not be able to move as fast as he does. And I think I don't think he's going to be quite as. I don't think Raya or a keeper is going to be quite as threatened by most other forwards that he's going to see in the league. But obviously, Haaland is a little bit different.
Yeah. But no, I mean, just like talking about Raya's performance, I mean, I think one of the standout moments for me was that one Wissa, is it Wissa or Wissa? I think I heard it both ways in the broadcast. but he had one really good opportunity if it landed at his feet toward the end of the match where they could have leveled. To me, he blasts it high, and I think a lot of the credit for that goes to Raya. Raya took it to him, got in his way. I think if he doesn't blast it high, I think there's a good chance Raya's arms get in the way and block that ball. I think that was a really good moment for him, aside from others, like doing what he does, like intercepting crosses in the air and stuff like that. But overall, pretty good day for him.
Yeah, I thought he was pretty good on this, and again, good job with the distribution. I thought he was. I thought plenty of Arsenal players had some pretty solid games. It's kind of interesting, and I can speak to the atmosphere in the group I was watching with. Even though we led 1-0 almost the entire game, the energy around sort of felt like almost like we were level. Like this was the what is it? The 0-0 against Forest. Like we're just begging the team to go forward and do something. But I don't know. I guess I don't think that's really quite representative of. But I don't know. Did you feel the same thing? Because I know you watch obviously by yourself. So I mean,
right. So not entirely by myself, with my son, who's obviously not super cerebral in his analysis of the match at 9 years old. But I mean, for me, I guess a lot of what I feed off of is what the commentators are saying, and I do my best to hear what they're saying over the chatter coming from the other side of a sofa. But I definitely wanted the extra goal. Like 1-0 always does feel precarious, especially when we don't have our preferred left or right backs playing. That does also lead to a little bit more like earlier in the season, I'd feel like, 1-0 to the Arsenal, like, we will be fine. Our defense is there. We do have Gabriel and Saliba, which we haven't at times this season. And, that does lead to some foundational security, but yeah, I definitely would have liked the extra goal, and especially as the match drew on, and especially as you start feeling, you're seeing basically almost the entire match we were behind in possession. Now, not by as severe a gap as against City, where they were really significantly ahead of us pretty much the whole time, but we were just on the other side of 50-50. That doesn't almost ever happen to us, and it was interesting that it was against Newcastle, and it didn't feel like it was to me, but that may have just kind of contributed to that sense of like, we need to get another goal because they do have the ball a lot and something could happen maybe.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because we've had a few of those instances, especially around the holidays, where we were conceding late goals, and in some cases dropping points because of it. Yeah, I guess to me it was weird. It almost felt like we needed to win 2-0 was sort of the atmosphere, the way I sensed it. Not so much that we were worried about giving up a goal. I mean, they create the chance with Wisa, but otherwise, really, they didn't really create a whole lot. But yeah, it felt like that we needed the goal because we wanted to go 2-0. And I think it was, you could argue it is an opportunity lost to score a goal that early in the game, to be on the front foot as much as we were, and to not come away with more than one. Does feel a little bit like an opportunity lost, especially when we think about the context of Manchester City. Yes, they beat Burnley midweek, but only 1-0. And so we were level on goal difference and within 2 goals scored. It's really tight. And so any goal, any opportunity matters. But here's as well, I think Havertz being injured really hurt us. I think Eze there coming out as well. I mean, Odegaard I thought played okay, but he and Gyökeres clearly have no connection with each other. Like you could just
there was one clear moment where Gyökeres quite possibly could have scored a goal had Odegaard passed it to him, and it was like Odegaard didn't even know he was there. That was disappointing.
Yeah, and I've heard, again, this is all fan banter, so who really knows? I mean, I do think it's fair to point out they haven't really. There's 2 parts to this. One is that they just haven't had a lot of time together with Odegaard's injuries. Like they haven't had a time to really work those things out. But 2, I think there is a bit. I mean, Gyökeres has deficiencies in his game technically. Like he's not the same kind of technical player. And I don't know that I'm not going to say they're afraid to pass to him, but he you put the ball at his feet and you're not getting the same kind of results as if you put it at, say, Ez's feet or Havertz's. I mean, you saw there was an opportunity late on where Gyökeres has acres of space to put the ball in for Saka, and he waits too long and he makes a poor pass that just gets blocked by the defender.
Right.
That, you know, there were opportunities here.
Yeah, that is it's frustrating hearing that, because that's something that I coach my youth players on. It's like, I know you don't think that he's going to be able to, for baseball, for instance, like, I know you don't think he's going to make the out if you throw it to second base, but you can't run halfway across the baseball field to try and do it yourself. Like, at a certain level, you have to trust your teammates, and maybe they let you down, but you have to give them the chance.
Yeah, and some of that's just fine margins too, because he does try to make the pass, but I think he's hesitated just enough, not because he's not sure that Saka can make the run. I think he just doesn't make that decision as quickly as he needs to, and so he hesitates, and the defender's able to get a foot in on it. Like, I think it's split second things like that. And we've seen some of these where how many times this season have we gone through stretches where it feels like all the passes are just a little bit off and they keep going the wrong, to the other team. And I think some of that's too, as we mentioned already, the player rotation, the different lineups, all of that happening. I think that's kind of, and it feels worse at this point because there's really nothing you can do about it. At this stage of the season, you're not, outside of a few set piece things, you're not adding new wrinkles here. You're running the plays that you've been running all season, but because of what we talked about, we haven't been able to run those plays, so we're still kind of working them out. So it's
right.
There's a frustration there, but I mean, we got the win, we got the 3 points. We're back on top of the league. We're here. I'd rather be in the position we're in right now, where we have the points in the bank, as opposed to City, who still has to play the extra game. So,
no, it's true.
And as we mentioned quickly, we'll get our second game in. We'll play when we play Fulham next week. We play before City plays, so we could be 6 points clear of them by the next time they play in the Premier League.
Yeah, no, hopefully we are. After this result, where does this leave Fulham? What is their season looking like?
Oh, Newcastle. Oh, poor Newcastle.
No, did I say Fulham? I meant Newcastle. Yeah. Thinking ahead instead of back, yeah.
So, yeah, Newcastle is such an interesting case to me. So they're currently sitting in 14th. They're on 42 points. They're 8 points clear of Spurs at 18th, which I'm not just saying that just to say Spurs are in the relegation zone. Just a bonus. But they are 8 points clear. There are 3 teams between them. So I don't think they're really in a relegate. I don't think relegation is something they're really going to be concerned about. But I think if you're Newcastle, they've lost 16 games this year. They're against 12 wins. They're owned by, or they're significantly invested in by the Saudi Public Investment Fund. They have arguably more money than any other team in the Premier League that they have access to. Now, because of sustainability, profit and sustainability rules, the financial fair play, they can't quite splash the cash in the way that Chelsea and Manchester City did in earlier generations, and they haven't built up the kind of equity that allows Arsenal or Liverpool to do something similar. So they're kind of.
Let me just ask you something about that quick. Did the financial fair play rules come into effect after Manchester City enshrined their current setup, so that they're kind of grandfathered in to having a bigger budget, essentially? Or
they were being worked on at first, and I'm going to get some of the dates wrong on this, so I'll be a little careful. But they were being worked on first in the aftermath of Chelsea, because when Chelsea in about 2003, 4, early 2000s was bought by Roman Abramovich, a Russian billionaire, who basically just started throwing money at them. And there were concerns from Arsenal, especially Arsene Wenger, but also Manchester United, Liverpool, some of the other big clubs at the time, about Chelsea sort of buying their way into the top of the league, which they ultimately did. He turns them into a club that has won the league a handful of times. And so there was some concern, and there are instances of clubs. Leeds went through this, Blackburn sort of, Portsmouth has done this, where teams have kind of overspent their income with the expectation of, oh, we'll get to the Champions League. Oh, we'll finish this high. We'll get that revenue. And then they don't make it.
Right.
And then
they collapse.
they collapse. They're severely financially restricted as a result of it. There is an argument, and I don't think it's unfair, that this whole financial fair play thing and the PSR rules do solidify the certain teams in the top of the financial table. But basically, yeah, they came into effect, or City were able to adjust their finances, as well as Arsenal and Liverpool and all these other clubs were able to adjust their finances to be compliant with it in a way that Newcastle wasn't able to. Now, there'd always been the talk that they would build more slowly. They wanted to build an academy, wanted to kind of build a long-term sustainable club. And look, they've made the Champions League twice under Saudi ownership. They won the Carabao Cup last year, so they've had some success. But both Champions League campaigns ended with them finishing mid-table in the league that year. They both kind of didn't really go any. I mean, they made the round of 16 in the Champions League and then got rather unceremoniously dumped out. And they've had some tough draws along the way. I kind of look at Newcastle. I mean, they sold some of their key players last year. Alexander Isak was the biggest name. And then they brought in guys that just frankly weren't as good. I think the real question is, and we talked about this a little bit in the pub. I mean, I for one kind of think Eddie Howe might have run his course with them. That I think maybe at the end of the season there might be a parting of the ways. Now, and plenty of people around me were skeptical and pointed out totally fairly, right, that as we just mentioned, they sold some good players and they didn't really bring in very good ones to replace them. Mm-hmm. So in a sense, he still took them into the round of 16 of the Champions League, even though the league schedule hasn't gone particularly well. So you could argue, in a sense, they're still doing okay. But it is kind of interesting, like, where does Newcastle see this going? Like, is Howe the guy who can take them there? Is there other investments they need to make that they can't or won't make? All of this, by the way, is coming on the heels of a couple weeks ago. It was announced the PIF, the Public Investment Fund, is pulling out of Live Golf, the competitor to the PGA.
Right.
I don't think they're suddenly about to sell Newcastle. I don't think that's going to happen. But, it is kind of an interesting question as the Saudis reconsider what they want to use the fund for. Like, where does that leave Newcastle in terms of the investment it'll get from its ownership group, in terms of what their expectations are, or maybe the degree to which they're involved? They could work the other way and sort of say, we're still in the league. We make the Champions League every couple of years. We're fine. Howe can stay. They are kind of in an interesting place as a club, and it'll be interesting to watch where they go over the next couple of weeks and the next couple of months. Spurs are kind of dealing with the crisis. I mean, Chelsea are kind of the same way. We talked about their management structure, what it's doing to them. There's a lot of sort of weird situations bubbling around in the league right now with some of these big money clubs. So, having faced Newcastle, I'll be curious where it goes from here.
Yeah. Well, before we leave Newcastle entirely, I wanted to ask you, was I hallucinating, or as I was watching the post-match mingling that happens, did I see Aaron Ramsdale? Because isn't he at Southampton in the Championship? Like, what's going on?
You did see Aaron Ramsdale because he's on a season-long loan from Southampton to Newcastle as their backup keeper.
Ah.
He's there. He's backup.
Did Southampton not even want him as a cup keeper? Because, geez.
I wonder if it was because I don't remember when he signed with them. Because remember, Southampton was in the Championship.
Right.
So I think it might be a case that he may have said, look, I would rather be like, because they were relegated last year, to see maybe sort of strong arm them and say, look, you can't afford me. On a championship budget, so there might be there's financial implications being on their roster or not.
I guess I was thinking of it just because Southampton did make a very deep run in the FA Cup, as it turns out. So
right, but I mean, let's put it this way: if he's at Southampton, he's there to be their starter. I don't think he's there. He's not there to be their backup. And if he's there to be their backup, he really does need a new agent. But I don't think that's what he's there.
Good point. Yeah. Yeah, makes sense.
But yeah, he's been with Newcastle all season, and good for him. Good for him. I hope it's been a good experience. We're happy with Raya, but still a lot of love in
definitely.
North London for
never disliked him. Yeah. Who is your player of the week?
This was an interesting choice because I actually thought a lot of guys yesterday had good days and did good things. I just run through the lineup. I thought Raya was pretty good. Gabriel and Saliba, especially Saliba. I thought Hincapié had another great week. Odegaard was really dangerous. Declan Rice does Declan Rice things. But to me, I'm going to throw in Eberechi Eze, and I'm going to do it for two reasons. One, because he scored the goal and it was pretty awesome. Two, because as we talked about in the show, him leaving the field was part of some of our drop off, and so I think it sort of underlines his importance to us and our ability to go forward, our ability to be offensively threatening. He is a player that can kind of create out of nothing, which is really nice to have. And so for me, I'm gonna throw a little bit of Ez as the most important player for us this week, even though we only got about a half out of him in the one game.
Yeah, no, that's a good call. He definitely did have a good week overall. It's an interesting point about appreciating him in his absence. Makes sense. Speaking of absences and affecting my choice, so this may be a little controversial, but I'm going to pick Bukayo Saka. Yes, I acknowledge he was on the pitch for 10 minutes plus stoppage time. So maybe this was actually a lot of stoppage time. So 17 minutes.
I don't know where that 7 minutes came from, but anyway.
I guess the one injury at least, but yeah, he wasn't. Yeah, I don't know. But so Saka played 17, 18 minutes, but man, is it good seeing that guy back in those 17 minutes. The things that he did, just like right off the bat, just like when he was injured and then came back earlier in the season, and like his first touch on the ball resulted in a goal. It was similar this week. Like he came back, he jukes around the defender, shakes him, gets a credible shot on goal, blocked by the outstretched leg of the defender in front of him. I think had that leg not been there, we might have seen a second goal right then and there. And yeah, just continued putting pressure, doing inventive things. It's good having him back taking corners. I think Madueke does fine. I think Odegaard apparently has been kind of supplanted by Madueke. I think Odegaard used to be our backup to Saka, but I think we've been having Madueke do that. But no, just when he's taking the corners, he's back doing that, placing them where we want. Rice similarly placed his corners very well. Credit to him for that yesterday also. But yeah, so we love you, Saka. Stay healthy, please.
Yeah, it's good to see him back. I think, he does add something to the lineup. And so, yeah, it's good to see him. And hopefully he continues to build up and we have him down the stretch run. Have a lot of him down the stretch run because we're going to need it.
Mm-hmm. We're top of the table. And I am almost willing to say we're still top of the table, given like if you look at it match week by match week, like there is no match week during which, like if you look at the Premier League table on their site, there's no match week during which we weren't top of the table. Like, yeah, there was a few days in there this week where City briefly supplanted us based on, I guess, goals scored because they did not pass us on goal difference with their abysmal performance against Burnley. Abysmal, and yet still they did win, but by a slim margin. So just real quick, obviously we're on 73 points from 34 games played. Manchester City's on 70 points from 33 games played. So we're up by 3 goal difference. We're at plus 38. They are at plus 37. So it's close. We were tied coming into that. And again, as you said, goals scored. Manchester City has 66. We have 64. So it is tight. It is very, very tight. Just about as tight as it could be, I think.
Right. And so we should also add, by the way, we'll just run quickly down the line, the rules here. The first tiebreaker, of course, is points. That's how the standings are determined. If you're tied on points, the next one's goal difference, then goals scored. And then the next one, which would be the last one in this case, is points gained in head-to-head competition. We would definitely lose that because City has 4 out of our games compared to our 1. So,
right.
That being said, I think if we both go 1-0 down to the end of the season and wrap up the points, I think that would put City ahead of us. That would put them ahead of us in terms of goals. I'm going to go on a limb here and say that it's not going to come down to goals scored. I think goal difference and goals for are so close together that it's not going to make enough of a difference. If you're ahead on goal difference, if they're tied on goal difference, I think, and we'll kind of be where we are. I think all we can do is win out. Just got to win those 4 games, and we'll kind of see. I think the City team has dropped points in them. I think that it just takes one slip up in what is going to be a chaotic schedule for them. It's going to be a little crazy for them too. Sort of looking at some of the teams we have to play, I think it's fair to say that they have some potentially trickier fixtures than we do down the stretch, but they could easily look at us and say, yeah, this Arsenal team has dropped points in them, and I don't think they're in. They're not wrong for thinking that. I think we can do it, but if we all we can do is win our last 4, try to pump in the goals if you can. I know that's why everybody was kind of frustrated with this Newcastle game. Again, look, Newcastle's given us problems the last few years. This is a team that's, that we've had some struggles against, or they've been kind of gutty, gritty games, and so I'm going to be happy with the 3 points, and we'll just kind of see where we stand when the dust settles.
Yeah. Well, meanwhile, down table, so City played Burnley on Wednesday. That was the match that brought them level with us on points and then only even with us on goal difference because they only managed to beat Burnley 1-0. Unfortunately for Burnley, that loss was enough to seal their fate as far as relegation for next season is concerned. So,
yes, with 4 to play, Burnley is out. They will be in the championship with Wolves next year. 1 relegation spot to go, and it's quite a battle down there. Probably, as we said, Forest, West Ham, and Spurs. Currently at Spurs, they finally won a game on Saturday, only to watch Forest and West Ham win also. So,
right,
we'll have to see. That'll be an interesting one to watch down the stretch as well. Lots of interesting races in the Premier League this season, including to the mid-table. You pointed this out to me as well. Like, Brighton is in 6th place with 50 points. Sunderland has 46 points. They're in 12th. That's 7 teams within 4 points of each other. Brighton's got Europa League spot. And then in 7th place, currently Bournemouth has a Conference League spot. There's Chelsea in 8th. And, of course, Brentford, Fulham, Everton, and Sunderland. So there are some... There could be a lot of maneuvering going on there over the last 4 games. Well, 4 games for everyone except Brentford, who is on 33 games. I believe they play Manchester United tomorrow, which is where that comes from. So Brentford may well be in a European spot when the dust settles tomorrow. So it'll be interesting.
So speaking of relegation and teams in unfortunate positions, so Leicester, remind me, they were in the Premier League just last season, right?
Yes, and rather more famously, about 10 years ago, in 2016, they won the Premier League.
Right. Well, apparently they just clinched relegation from the Championship down to League One. So 2 years, 2 relegations. That's rough.
Yeah, they have been a mess. There's really no other way to describe it, because even if you, I'm just gonna pull up that table real quick because I remember looking at it. Oh, yeah, this is next year's. Set things up. Even if you look at it, they were deducted points. I was reading the note, 6 points for breaching profit and sustainability rules. But if you give them those 6 points, they are still they're still would have been relegated.
Right.
So, I mean, they're better than Sheffield Wednesday, who, again, as we said, has had 18 points deducted from them this season. They're currently sitting at -3 in terms of their points.
That is really harsh. They must have
really
messed up.
1 win in 45 games in the league.
Wow.
12 draws and 32 losses.
Whew, man, that is severe.
Yeah. Yeah. Or Wednesday.
They're one of those names. It's like, as I'm rereading through Fever Pitch, it's funny. Like, I am now actually familiar with most of the teams that he mentions from Arsenal's past years at the top division. I think there's some that got mentioned. One club that got mentioned today that I still was like, okay, I guess I don't know them, but like, it's rare. I know most of them now.
Yeah, quite an interesting struggle, by the way, at the top of the championship. Coventry City has their spot. They're in Ipswich Town, Millwall, Middlesbrough, and Southampton are all within 4 points of that second spot. Currently, it's Ipswich who has it. And then currently, Wrexham, Hollywood FC there, is sitting in 6th place in a playoff spot. So it is not entirely out of the possibility that they will be it's not done yet. They wouldn't be in the Premier League last year. I don't think it'll be the case. I think it's probably Coventry. Southampton's been charging up the table. Yeah, again, there's a lot to play for in the last month of the season.
Now, this may not be the time. Tell me if it's not. But I still don't fully understand the playoff in the championship. And this was actually pointed out to us by a viewer when we briefly covered promotion and relegation in a short. So, we spent under a minute talking about it. And naturally, there wasn't even time to contemplate talking about the championship playoff in that format. But he pointed out that it is a little more complicated than what we talked about. And I think at the time, I wasn't even necessarily even aware of that. But do we have time, or should we table that?
Yeah, We'll make it quick. So, top in the championship, and this, by the way, goes for League One and League Two as well. Top two teams automatically promoted. Teams 3 through 6 have a playoff. Number 3 plays number 6. Number 4 plays number 5. 2 legs, home and away. The winners go to Wembley, and that game, the winner gets the third promotion spot. In fact, because of the financial benefit that comes from it, it is known as the richest game in football. To earn that spot to the Premier League is a big moment. I believe it was Sunderland. That's how Sunderland got in last year.
Oh, okay. Oh, cool. That's a cool way to do it. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, nice. What is coming up next week for Arsenal?
2 big ones. Well, they're all big ones, right? With so few left. First, on Wednesday, Arsenal heads to the Estadio Metropolitano in Madrid to take on Atlético Madrid. I think a result is good. Obviously, a win would be fantastic. This is the semifinals of the Champions League. I think if you can come home with level, that's a good thing. I think if you can come home ahead, that's even better. Big opportunity here, semifinals of the Champions League. Oh boy, we got this far last year, but here we go. If you want to go further into the Champions League, also check out on Tuesday the other semifinal, Bayern Munich and Paris Saint-Germain. I believe the first leg is in Paris, and then the second leg will be next week in Munich while we have our second leg next week. This game, by the way, both the games in this first leg in the U.S. will be on network television on CBS.
Ooh.
So, also Paramount Plus.
CTV, right?
Well, that was NBC who did that. But
was
Paramount
it?
Plus.
Okay, my bad.
Paramount Plus has it also if you're a streamer. But if you get network television, I see them listed as being on CBS, both of them on Tuesday and Wednesday. So that'll be fun.
Yeah, cool. So what should we expect from this Atletico Madrid match? I know we defeated them in the league phase earlier this season. Should we be feeling pretty good about it?
Well, so the reputation that they've brought over the years under Simeone has been that they're very difficult to play against. They're very tough to break down. They're a very physical, counterattacking team. sort of negative anti-football a little bit. That is not the team we have this year. In some ways, they remind people a little bit of Sporting. They have certainly a strong defensive core. They can certainly score more goals. The big difference is we're Sporting's finishers and not that impressive, all things considered, whereas they've got Julian Alvarez, who's been very impressive. So it is a game where we will need to be on our toes. This is not something... They're certainly a better team than the teams we faced so far in the knockout stages in terms of Bayer Leverkusen and Sporting. Obviously, it's the semifinals. You would expect that. But certainly, having knocked out Barcelona, Atleti is going to feel very good about what they're capable of. And we need to be on our toes defensively to come away with this one. We've mentioned it already. Saturday, Premier League against Fulham. That'll be on NBC. So get excited for that. All network television this week.
Thanks for joining us at Gooner U. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can also listen to the podcast version of our show on Apple, Spotify, and some other places. If you're only listening, try watching us on YouTube with the link in the show notes. Your homework for today is for our podcast listeners to rate and review our show wherever you listen to us. We do record the show using Zencaster. If you'd like to try it out, you can support Gooner U by signing up using the link in the description, which also has links to everything we talked about and our socials. Again, my name is Dove, and you can find me on Twitter at DoveFrankel. With me, as always, is Keith, and you can find him in a pub watching Arsenal matches.
Just win, baby.